Okay, this is video 413, Math 413, and today we're going to talk about reducing fractions, and we're going to also talk about adding some mixed numbers. We learned last time about the greatest common factor. Well, you're going to need to know about the greatest common factor to reduce fractions. That's something you need to know to reduce fractions. So let's look at a fraction, for example, 4 over 8. So that fraction is 4/8. So if I took a pizza, we'll say, and I cut it into 8 pieces. Now this is a horrible drawing, I realize that. I'm not a good drawer. Anyway, that's roughly 8 pieces. So if I shade in 4 of those pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces, I'm going to shade in 4 of them. Guess I could have done this on a PowerPoint, maybe and showed you a little better, but you know, it's kind of fun to do this. So there's that. So looking at that, how much of that pizza did I shade in? Well, I shaved in 4 out of 8 pieces. What else does it look like to you? I shaded in. You might look at that, so it looks like you shaded in exactly half of it, and you would be right, because 4/8 equals 1/2. Now, how do we figure that out? That's called reducing a fraction. We're going to reduce it from 4/8 to 1/2. If I do the same pizza over here, oh my goodness, it's moving close. Let's see if I can get a little closer. So if I got the same pizza there, and I just cut it in half, and I shade in half of it, it's going to look about the same if my drawings were even close together. But you get the idea of what I'm saying. 4/8 is equal to 1/2. So let's see why or how we do that. The easiest way to reduce a fraction is to find your greatest common factor. We talked about that in the last video. So the greatest common factor between 4 and 8, well, 4 would be 1, 2, and 4. That's your factors of 4. Hopefully you've done enough practice with factoring now you can start to recognize that. 1 times 4 is 4, 2 times 2 is 4. So those are the only factors. So for 8, your factors are 1 times 8 would equal 8, and 2 times 4 would equal 8. So those are your factors of 8. So what is the greatest common factor? Well, your greatest common factor is 4. That's the biggest number that's a common factor between these two numbers. Now, if you'll take this fraction and divide it by the greatest common factor, then you'll have your reduced fraction. So if we take this 4 and we divide this 4 by 4, that equals 1. Well, if we take this 8 and divide this 8 by 4, it's divided by the same number. Whatever you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. It has to be the same. So if you divide this 4 by 4, you get 1. If you divide this 8 by 4, you get 2. So that reduces to 1/2. 1/2 is the same as 4/8. Okay, so let's do a couple of these to help you understand this a little more. Let's take the numbers 9 and 27. Now, 9 over 27 is a fraction. Can we make that fraction lower? Those are big numbers. Can we make those numbers any lower? Well, let's find the greatest common factor between 9 and 27. Well, 1 is so factors of 9 would be 1, 3, and 9. The factors of 27 would be 1, 3, and 9, and 27, right? Okay, I had to think for a second there. So 1, 3, 9, and 27. would be the common factors of 27. So what's common between the 9 and the 27? What factor is common between there? Well, the 9 is. The 9 is common. So, since 9 is the greatest common factor, let's divide the top by 9 and divide the bottom by 9. And we'll see what we end up with. Well, 9 divided by 9 equals 1. And 27 divided by 9, because remember, you got to, what you divide the top by, you have to divide the bottom by the same thing. 27 divided by 9 is 3. So the answer to that will be 1/3. So 9 27ths will reduce to 1/3. Now, what happens if you don't find the greatest common factor? That's not the end of the world. Let's just say we take the number 8 20ths. We'll just say that. And let's say, well, we don't know what the common is, but we know they're both even numbers. Well, if they're both even numbers, we know that the number 2 will divide into both of them evenly. So let's just say we divide this, we want to reduce this, we divide this by 2, because we know 2 will go into 8 and 2 will go into 20. Well, 2 goes into 8 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. So if we divide it by 2, 8 divided by 2 is 4. And we're going to divide the bottom by the 2 also. 20 divided by 2 is 10. Okay, great. So now, 8 20ths does equal 4 tenths. Those are equal to each other. But is 4 tenths the lowest? Is that in the simplest form, is that the smallest numbers for that fraction? No, 4 tenths will reduce again. They're both even numbers. Well, if they're both even numbers, you can divide by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So we've got 2/5. So 8 20ths reduces to 2/5. Now, if we would have done our prime factorization, we could have skipped this middle step. We would have seen that the factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. And the factors of 20 are 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, and 20. Okay? 1 times 20 is 20, 2 times 10 is 20, and 4 times 5 is 20. So then we would look at this and say, well, what's our greatest common factor between these two? Well, the greatest common factor would be 4. So if the greatest common factor is 4, if we would have divided by 4 to start with, we would have got straight to this number and would have skipped the middle step. So that's why it's best to be able to find your greatest common factor to reduce by. But any number that will go into both numbers evenly will work for you. What if we said 12 18ths? Well, we could start to think in our head, well, what numbers will go into 12 and what numbers will go into 18? Well, 18, there's only 1, 3, 6. Well, there's two, well, no, there's not. There's more. I was trying to pick up one smaller numbers. But the factors of 18 are 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, and 18. There's that many of them. Okay, and then the factors of 12, of course, are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. Okay, so those are the factors of 12 and the factors of 18. Now, I don't expect you to be able to just write out the factors like that as quickly as I did. I just have to know these factors of these. And once you do them enough, you'll learn them too. But it's best to go through and think, well, now 1 times 12 is 12, then 2, and then 3, and figure that out that way. But you've hopefully been practicing doing that and finding your factors. So I'm just kind of skipping that part for now and getting to putting the factors out so we can learn to reduce. The greatest common factor between these two, of course, would be 6. Okay, since that's the greatest common factor, we can divide this by each side by 6. Well, 12 divided by 6 equals 2, and 18 divided by 6 equals 3. Okay? Now, looking at that, we've always got to look at, so, well, could that reduce any further? Well, no, we know 2 is prime because there's nothing else that would divide into 2 besides 1 in itself, and there's nothing else that will divide into 3 except 1 in itself. So you can't, there's no other factors between 2 and 3 that you could divide by. So 2/3 would be the lowest fraction in that case. So that's how you reduce fractions, and you'll be doing a lot of that when you have your problems from here on out. And you get an answer, and let's just say your answer ends up being, 3/12. Well, and say it was a multiple choice problem, and you worked the problem out and you ended up with 3/12, and you might look at your multiple choice and say, well, 3/12 isn't there. Well, that's because that is not in simplest form. That's not in the lowest form. Can that reduce any more? Is there any number that will go into 3 and 12? Well, 3 we know is prime, but even though it's prime, they are still factors of 3. It would be 1 and 3. That's the factors of 3. Well, what's the factors of 12? Well, 12, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. So, is there anything common? Well, yes, the 3 is common between there. So, you can divide this by 3, and you get 1. You can divide this by 3, and you get 4. So actually, if you work this out and it was a multiple choice test, instead of having 3/12, it would have 1/4. It would have the lowest reduced, the most simplified fraction. So, all right, so let's talk about adding some mixed numbers. We've added fractions. We said you can add fractions if you've got a common denominator. Remember, if we had 2/5 plus 1/5, then we could add the top numbers together and it would be 3/5. That would be how you would add fractions. We've done that before. But what if we had a mixed number? A mixed number is when you have something that is whole. Let's say we have 3 and 2/5. Oh, okay. So now we've got 3 and 2/5 of something. That means we've got a little bit more than 3, but not all the way to 4. Okay. Remember we did some division with remainders, and we showed how we could put remainders as fractions. Sometimes instead of just having a remainder, you could have it as a fraction. Well, that's a mixed number. So if we have 4.5 of something, that means we have, let's just say these are 4.5, we'll go back to pizzas again. Let's say if we have 4.5 pizzas, you got 4 whole pizzas, and here I go with my drawing again, and then you have half of a pizza. That would be 4.5. That would be a mixed, what they call a mixed number, okay? Now if we have 4.5 plus, let's say we had 2.5, well, I don't have that yet. I want to keep this a little more simple. So let's try it this way. So let's say we have 3 and 1/5, and we want to add to that 1 and 2/5. So let's say we want to add that together. That's 2 mixed numbers. 3 and 1/5 is a mixed number, and 1 and 2/5 are mixed numbers. So can we add those together? Well, since we have a common denominator, that means our denominator is the same, then yes, we can add it together. So we add this together. 1 plus 2 is 3, so we got 3/5, and then we add our whole part of the number. This is the fraction part, this is the whole part. 3 plus 1 is 4. So our answer would be 4 and 3/5. That's how you would add those two together. Let's do a couple of those. Let's go 2 and 2/8 plus 3 and 4/8. Now, we're going to add these together. Now, you may already look at this and think, oh, well, these fractions are not in lowest terms yet, and you're right, and we're going to deal with that in just a moment. But let's see if we can add these together. if that's an 8 and that's an 8, we have a common denominator. So we know that we can put our 8 down there and we can add these top two numbers, because we learned before you can add 2 8s plus 4 8s, you can add together. You just bring your 8 over. If it's common, you don't add them together, you keep it, and then you add the top numbers, and then 2 8s plus 4 8s is 6 8s. Okay, we learned that a while back. So 2 plus 4 is 6, so we've got 6 8s. Okay, then we add our whole part of the number. 3 plus 2 is 5, so we've got 5 and 6 8ths would be the answer to that problem. But is that in simplest terms? And the answer would be no. 6 and 8 will reduce. Okay, one way that you know automatically will reduce, they're both even numbers. If they're both even numbers, it's going to reduce, because you know an even number will always, you can always divide it by 2 at least, sometimes over. So we're going to leave our 5 alone. We're going to keep that separate from this now. We're just going to bring our 5 down here and leave it there. We're going to simplify this fraction and bring it down. So 6 and 8s, you can divide, we said they're even numbers, so divide that by 2. Divide the top and the bottom by 2, and that equals 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So 6 8ths reduces to 3/4, so we can bring our 3/4 down here with our 5, and so we got 5 and 3/4. So those are mixed numbers, and now we've already combined adding mixed numbers and reducing problems at the same time. So let's do one more. Let's do 7 1/8 plus 3 1/8 plus 2 and let's do 2 and 4 8ths. So let's add, we've got 3 numbers here, which is not a problem. As long as our denominator is common, we can add as many numbers as we want to, as many add-ins as we want to, as long as the denominator is common. So we're going to add these up, 4, 5, 6. You got 1/8 plus 1/8, that's 2 8s plus 4 8s. That makes 6 8s. We're back to the same thing we had a while ago. 6 8, and then we add our whole numbers, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we have 12 and 6 8ths. Well, if you remember a while ago, our 6 8ths reduced to 3/4, but if you don't remember that, remember you can divide the top and the bottom by 2, because they're both even numbers, and that gives you 3/4. 6 divided by 2 is 3, 8 divided by 2 is 4, it's the same thing we had a while ago. 12 and 3/4 would be the answer to that problem. Let's see if I pick a number different than 3/4 this time. So let's go with a bigger number on the, let's go with 12 on the bottom. Okay, and let's go with 2 and 3/12 and 3 and 1/12. So let's add that together. We've got a common denominator, so we can add our 3 plus our 1 to give us 4, and our common denominator is 12, so we keep it. And then 3 plus 2, put the addition signs here, 3 plus 2 is 5, and we got 5 and 4/12. Now, is that the lowest answer? We'd have to look, well, is there any number that will go into 4 and go into 12 evenly? Well, yes, there is. Our factors of 4 are 1, 2, and 4. Our factors of 12 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. If you took your time to really factor all those out, you'd find that. All right, so if these are the factors of 4 and these are the factors of 12, what's common between those two? And that would be the 4. So since that's common, we can divide the top by 4 and the bottom by 4. And that would equal 4 divided by 4 is 1, 12 divided by 4 is 3, 1/3. We're going to 5 down, 5 and 1/3 would be our answer to that problem. Let's do a subtraction problem. Same idea, works the same, we're just subtracting instead of adding. So let's go 9 and 8 9ths. And let's subtract 2 and 2 9ths. So we're going to subtract now. Now, as long as we have a common denominator, we can subtract the top number. So we got a common denominator, so our numerator, if you want to be exact about it, the top number is 8 and 2. We're going to minus that. 8 subtract 2 is 6. And then our 9 we'll just bring down because of that, 6/9. And then 9 subtract 2 for our whole number is 7. So our answer will be 7 and 6/9. So we always have to look at our fraction and say, is this the simplest or the lowest form? Is that as low as these numbers can go? And we have to look at our factors. Is there a factor between 6 and 9 that's common? Is there a number that will go into 6 and a number that will go into 9 evenly? Well, yes, if you did your factors out, you should know that 3 will go into 6 and 3 will go into 9. So if we divide the 6 by 3, we get 2. And since we divided that by 3, we have to divide this by 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So 6/9 will reduce to 2/3. So we got our 7, don't forget our 7, 7 and 2/3 would be the answer for that problem. So that's how you add and subtract mixed numbers, and that's how you reduce the fractions.